Hi, forum folks. I've been pondering for a long time whether to post this at all. But when you're rocking your little one to sleep and hear how your ancestors, those who erased you from their reality, are suddenly begging for a new chance, something inside crumbles. And you don't understand, are you a monster or just an individual who's tired of the wounds? But the roots of it all go much deeper. From the moment they essentially crossed me out. I turned 22. I lived in a modest suburb not far from Boston in the States. A typical middle-class family, dad, a financier, mom, a college educator, older sister Anna, the perfect offspring. Everything revolved around a flawless facade, Dad often said. The Miller family must serve as an example for the neighbors. I didn't really grasp what that implied until I grew up. When I got into college, I first felt the freedom to be myself. I started a romance with a girl. Her name was Amber. She was amazing, sensitive, independent, witty, with a laugh that infected everyone around. But according to my parents, she had an unsuitable background. Her dad ran a tiny bar, her mom worked as a stylist. Mine thought I should be involved with someone from a dynasty with prospects. Funny, right? They talked about level like it was a stock commodity. I remember the first conversation on this topic like it was yesterday. I showed up home for the weekend, and Mom greeted me with a frosty grimace. "We discussed it with your father. We think Amber isn't for you." "Why not?" I asked, though I guessed. "Because she's not from our circle. She has no horizons. You do. Don't ruin them for a whim." I stayed silent, because in that second I realized they don't see me as a person. Just as an investment, and any deviation from their plan is a defect that needs to be fixed. From then on, the connections started crumbling. I still called them, tried to explain that I loved Amber, that we were serious, but their responses became more and more detached. Dad said, "You're making the most fatal mistake of your life. When you realize it, it'll be too late." I thought it was just an emotional outburst, but then something happened that etched itself into my memory forever. It was November, a cool, damp day. I rushed home before Thanksgiving with a ring in my pocket. I intended to tell my parents that I'd proposed to Amber. I didn't even get a chance to open my mouth. They already knew. Someone from Friends spotted us in a cafe where I proposed and kindly reported to Dad. When I stepped into the house, the air was electrified, like before a storm. Mom stood by the window with a stony expression, Dad behind the desk with a packet in his hands. "We know everything," he said, "and if you're seriously intent on standing by this." He tossed the packet to me. "Then you have no place in this dynasty." I opened it. Inside was a document, formal, legally polished. "We, the undersigned, remove financial guardianship over our offspring," and so on. I didn't immediately grasp the essence. They weren't just arguing, they were literally disowning me. "Are you serious?" I asked. "This a prank?" Mom turned away. Dad said quietly but firmly, "You made your choice." "I chose love, Dad." "No, you chose vulnerability." I stumbled out of the house in the rain, with that packet in my fist. It was like a knife in the back. I wandered the sidewalk and felt neither the cold nor the agony, just a vacuum. Everything inside burned to ashes. I never set foot there again. Amber picked me up at the station. I tried to grin, but it didn't work. I just handed her the packet. She read it and burst into tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is because of me." "No," I cut her off. "This is because of them." That night we slept in each other's arms as if our fate depended on it. Probably it did. Because in that moment I understood, family isn't those who gave you life. It's those who stand by you when others turn away. The following years were tough. I dropped out of college because my parents refused to fund my studies, and I couldn't get a loan. I worked wherever, on construction sites, in shops, as a delivery guy. Amber was always by my side. She didn't whine, didn't blame. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and think, is it worth the effort? But then I'd see her smile in her sleep and realize, yes, it is. Little by little, life got better. I got a job at a small IT firm, studied in the evenings, grabbed certifications, rose to project coordinator. We rented an apartment in Chicago, then bought a cozy cottage. And then, 6 years after that conversation with my parents, Amber said the words that turned everything upside down. "I'm expecting a child." I stood in the middle of the dining room with a cup of tea in my hands and just froze. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or drop to my knees. She approached, placed my hand on her belly, still flat but already full of meaning, and said, "We'll have a dynasty, a real one." I remember how we laughed, shed tears, planned, picked names. But deep down, I still felt a shadow. Somewhere there in the suburb near Boston, live people who don't even know they're becoming grandparents. And I didn't know what to feel about it, rage or longing. In the 6th month of pregnancy, Amber suggested, "Maybe write to them, at least, just inform." I stared into space for a long time, then said, "If they're interested, they'll find a way." She nodded, didn't push. But I caught in her gaze the question she didn't voice. Will you ever be able to let go of the resentment? 4 months passed, and then the birth. Night, rain outside the window, the same damp November, but this time, a different feeling. I cradled my daughter in my arms, a little bundle that squeaked as if declaring to the world, I exist. Amber glowed, exhausted but blissful. I kissed her and said, "We did it, we're a dynasty." And in that moment, I felt like that ancient pain had evaporated. Like I was finally free. But I was wrong. 4 days after discharge, Amber handed me the phone. "You should look." On the screen, a notification from Instagram. A friend request from my mother. I froze. 6 years. 6 years of silence, no calls, no notes. And now a request, no text, just the add button. I didn't accept, but something stirred inside. And the next day, a message arrived. 3 words. "We want to see our granddaughter." I reread the line probably 30 times. My hands shook. Images flashed before my eyes. The packet with that document, Dad behind the desk, the frost in his tone, how they disowned me. "And now we want to see." I didn't respond. But that night, I didn't sleep a wink. Amber asked, "You know they'll find a way if they decide to show up." "I know," I replied, "but now everything's different." She looked at me intently. "What do you feel?" I thought, I don't know, probably a vacuum and a bit of horror. I thought it was just a coincidence. But no, it was just the beginning. Because 10 days later, Dad called me. I always believed that history stays in the past if you don't look back. But the truth is, it just waits for you to weaken. When you have something that can be lost. After that message from Mom, "We want to see our granddaughter," I paced the house for several days. Couldn't focus. Every phone notification made my pulse race. But neither Amber nor my daughter should notice that I'm broken. We had just started a new life. Cozy cottage, smell of baby food, the silence of nights occasionally broken by the baby's cry and me getting up to rock her. I didn't even suspect I could love someone so much. Every breath of hers, every gesture seemed like magic. And every time I rocked my daughter, I felt one thing. You'll never know what it means to be discarded. But when the phone rang and Dad popped up on the screen, history burst into the house like a gust of wind. I didn't answer right away. 3 rings, 4, 5. Amber stood nearby, looking at me. I pressed answer. "Hello," Dad's voice was unusually weak. "Hello. This is me." "I know," I said dryly. 6 years haven't erased my memory. He paused. "We know you have a daughter. Congratulations." "Thanks. We'd like to see her." I almost snorted. "After you erased me." "We made a mistake," he said quietly. "We were stubborn, we thought we knew better." Something twisted in my chest. "You didn't just make a mistake, Dad, you disowned me. Formally, remember, you signed it." Yes, I remember." "So do I." Silence. And then he said, "People evolve." "But not you," I snapped and hung up. Amber approached, hugged me. "It's okay," she murmured. "You don't owe them or history anything." "But why now?" I asked. Why now when everything's finally settled? She didn't respond, but I saw worry in her gaze. And honestly, I was scared too, not for myself, but for the dynasty I'd just created. A week passed. Amber and I tried to return to routine. Outings with the stroller down the alley, nighttime talks, rare hours of sleep. I resumed work, remotely a couple hours a day. And I almost convinced myself that the call was just a splash from history that would soon fade. But one morning, when I was taking out the trash, I saw them. They stood at the gate. Mom and Dad. The same ones I hadn't seen in 6 years. I froze. Mom looked older, wrinkles, silver strands, eyes reddened. Dad shrunken, like the energy had drained out of him. They held a gift, a plush bunny and a bunch of lilies. "Don't be mad," Mom whispered quietly. "We just wanted to see you." I didn't respond. I felt everything inside contracting. Like the years I'd spent healing wounds were suddenly in vain. "Leave," I said evenly. "I don't intend to talk to you." "We can't just leave," Dad interjected. "You're our offspring." "Was," I countered, "until you decided I was a disgrace to the dynasty." Mom burst into tears. "We were wrong," she repeated. We panicked that we'd lose you if we approved your choice." "You lost me anyway." I slammed the gate. I heard her muttering through sobs. "Please, at least show us our granddaughter." I didn't look back. That evening, I told Amber everything. She was silent for a long time, then asked, "And what do you feel?" "Nothing," I replied. "Absolute nothing." "That's a lie." "Maybe, I just don't know what to feel." She sighed. "I'm not going to force you to forgive, but make sure you're doing this not out of revenge, but protection." "It's the same," I said. "I'm protecting us because I don't want to be back in that house where affection has to be earned." A few more days passed. I thought they'd back off, but no. Notes, messages, even a Thanksgiving card signed, with warmth, Mom and Dad. Each time I tore the envelope and threw it away, but my hands shook. Because no matter how hard I tried, part of me still waited for them to truly repent. For them to say, "We're proud of you despite everything." But they never did. In March, I got a letter. Not a text, not a call, a real letter by mail. Mom's handwriting. "Son, if you're reading this, you're still offended. We're not begging for mercy. We just want to see the little one while it's not too late. Dad's unwell. Seriously." I reread it 4 times. Didn't know whether to believe it. They always knew how to play on pity. But if it's true... Amber looked at me when I told her. "You have to decide yourself," she said, "but if you go, I'll follow you." I agreed to a meeting. Not because I forgave, just wanted to hear the truth. We headed to Boston, to that same cottage from which I'd once been kicked out. It hadn't changed much, only peeling siding and a wilted lawn. When I stepped inside, the scent of youth hit my memory. Coffee, wax, the tick of antique clocks. Dad sat in an armchair, truly pale and shrunken. Mom served us drinks. The silence dragged on agonizingly. Then he said, "I don't want to pass away without seeing my grandchild." I was silent. "Is this pressure or a plea?" I finally asked. "It's desperation," he replied. "I know I deserve your enmity, but please give me a chance." I looked at Amber. She squeezed my hand. "We have a daughter," I whispered. "Her name is Livia." Mom beamed through tears. "Beautiful name." "Yes," I countered. "We chose it because it means the one protected by fate." They fell silent. I saw Mom's lips trembling. "We're truly sorry," she said. "Every day we were idiots, pride broke us." I wanted to believe. Part of me even wanted to hug them. But another part remembered everything. Every line, every look, when I stood in the rain with that damn packet. When we left the cottage, Amber said, "What have you decided?" "I don't know," I replied. "They spoke from the heart, but it doesn't erase the past." That evening, Mom texted, "Can we at least see a photo of Livia? We won't impose." I stared at the screen for a long time. In the end, I just closed the chat. Didn't respond. The following weeks were torture. On one hand, guilt, they're aging sick, asking for little. On the other, memories, pain, cold, betrayal. I composed and deleted a bunch of messages. You can see her. I forgive you. Don't you dare approach. Didn't send any. And then a scene happened that changed everything. Amber and I were walking in the park. Livia was sleeping in the stroller. And suddenly she tensed. I turned and saw Mom. She stood a couple yards away, just staring. In her hands, the same plush bunny. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Please, she whispered. I just wanted to see, even from afar. Amber stepped forward, gently but firmly. You should leave. This isn't the place or time. Mom nodded, looked down, and walked away. I stood, unable to move. My pulse pounded. And then I understood, there's no from afar. The past always tries to get closer. That night, I didn't sleep again. I watched Livia resting in the crib and thought, if they had acted differently then, could I be different now? Softer, more forgiving. But then I remembered their faces that day, their coldness, their signatures on that document, and realized, no. Because sometimes, to build a new reality, you have to lock the old one away forever. Several weeks passed after that day in the park. Mom didn't appear anymore, no notes, calls stopped. I finally started breathing freely. But freedom is a tricky thing. It always foreshadows a storm. In the summer, Amber returned from maternity leave. She taught at a local school nearby. I continued working from home, and our daughter grew before our eyes. First syllables, first steps, first smile that seemed to light up the whole universe. We led an ordinary, quiet, joyful life. Until a letter arrived. It looked official, envelope without sender address, inside, a form with a stamp from a Boston law firm. When I opened it, my hands shook. Mr. Alex Miller, you are notified of the critical condition of your father, Mr. Robert Miller. He is in St. John's Hospital. Due to his condition, the family requests to inform the closest relatives. I reread it 4 times. Hospital, closest relatives. Me. Amber noticed how I paled. What's wrong? Dad, my voice broke. He's in the hospital. She approached, hugged me. Do you want to go? I don't know. You need to decide yourself, but, she looked at me carefully, if you don't go, you might blame yourself later. I nodded. And that same evening, I was on a bus to Boston. The hospital greeted with the smell of disinfectant and beeping monitors. In the room, Dad looked like a ghost of himself, shrunken, pale, hooked up to oxygen. Mom sat beside. When I entered, she gasped. Alex, you came. I nodded. I came to make sure it's true. Dad slowly opened his eyes. Son, I didn't respond. I don't want to die without telling you the main thing, he rasped. I was wrong. All my life I thought I was raising you right, but I was mistaken. Words stuck in my throat. I didn't know how to react. He continued. When you said you wanted to tie your fate with Amber, I thought you were ruining your life, but in fact I was ruining my own essence. You ruined mine, I whispered. Mom burst into tears. Dad closed his eyes. I'm not begging for forgiveness if you're not ready. Just know, I'm proud of you. Those words hit harder than any reproach. Because I'd waited for them all my life. 10 days later, he was gone. Mom called late at night. I listened silently as she sobbed. Then simply said, I'll come to the funeral, but not for him, for myself. At the funeral, I stood a bit apart. Amber couldn't come. Our daughter had a slight cold, a runny nose. Mom approached, clutching a black scarf. Thank you for coming. It's duty, I countered, not an act of mercy. She nodded. I know. After the ritual, we stood by the grave. Mom looked at me. Will you let me see my granddaughter? No. Why? Her voice trembled with agony. I've lost everything, husband, son. You lost your son when you kicked me out. I turned and left without looking back. At home, Amber asked, How was it? Calm, I replied, and creepy. Why creepy? Because I feel nothing. No rage, no grief, just a vacuum. She placed her hand on my shoulder. Sometimes a vacuum isn't absence of emotions. It's the space where scars heal. A month passed. We returned to routine again. Amber worked, Livia grew, and I thought I'd finally drawn a line. But the past, as it turned out, wasn't done with me. One day, I got a message from the lawyer. In accordance with the final will of Mr. Robert Miller, you are designated as the heir to his property and assets. I almost dropped the envelope. They had erased me. Formally, Dad rewrote the will before his death. I went to the office. The lawyer, a gray-haired gentleman with a polite smile, handed the papers. Yes, Mr. Miller, everything is in order. Your father bequeathed you the cottage, savings, and insurance fund. And Mom, I asked. To her, a lifetime pension, but the main part to you. I didn't know what to say. They erased me, and then he returned everything. And now I couldn't understand. Was this compensation or a new form of control? When I told Amber, she was silent. Then said, "You don't have to accept. But if I refuse, it'll go to the bank. Sometimes peace of mind is worth more than money." I sat at the table and stared at the papers. At Dad's signature, at the date 10 days before his passing. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Maybe I don't deserve forgiveness, but perhaps you deserve balance. A few days later, I went to Boston again. The cottage was empty. Mom had moved to her aunt's. I wandered through the rooms where I'd once grown up. Every corner held an echo, smell of paint, furniture marks, an old family photo forgotten on the shelf. And then I understood, a cottage isn't walls, it's where you're valued. So this cottage was never mine. I left the keys on the desk and walked out. Mom called in the evening. "I heard you were at the cottage." "Yes. And what's next?" "Nothing, sell it or live there." "And the wills?" "I don't need anything." She paused. "He would be proud of you," she whispered quietly. "Maybe, but I'd like him to have said it while alive." A few weeks later, I got another message. Mom wrote, "Alex, I don't want conflict anymore. If you'll allow, I'd like to see my granddaughter, once. No drama, no pressure, just to see." I showed the message to Amber. She was silent for a long time, then said, "I don't know what to advise." "Me neither." We went to bed, but I couldn't fall asleep. In my head, her voice echoed, not the cold one from when they kicked me out, but a new one, exhausted, broken. The next day, I texted her. "Okay once, but not at the cottage, in the park, in public." She responded instantly. "Thank you, son." We met 10 days later, on a bench by the pond. Amber cradled Livia, Mom sat opposite. She trembled, as if afraid to touch. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," I countered. "She has your eyes." "And Amber's too," I added, trying to lighten the mood. Mom smiled through tears. "I don't deserve this." "I know," I said, "but she deserves to know that even bad stories can have an end." She burst into tears. "Thank you. Don't show up without notice anymore." When she left, Amber looked at me. "You did the right thing." "I'm not sure." "No," she said gently, "you drew the line." That night, I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. I listened to my daughter's breathing, staring at her face, and thought. Maybe that's the point. Not revenge, not forgetting, but just not repeating. The past returned, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. I'm no longer that guy who was kicked out of the cottage. I'm a father who will never do the same to his daughter. 4 months passed after the meeting in the park. Life got back on track. Morning tea, outings with Livia, evenings with Amber, rare calls from colleagues. With each day, I thought less about Mom, the past, the pain. But as it turned out, the past never leaves quietly. It returns, not loudly, not threateningly, but almost in a whisper. And that whisper came in the form of a letter. The handwriting was the same, uneven with a slight slant. "Dear Alex, I don't want to bother you or intrude. I just wanted to say that what you've created with my granddaughter is magic. I saw in her a glow that I haven't noticed in myself for many years. I'm ill, it's not critical, but The doctors say I should be near family. I'm not begging for mercy. I just want you to know I'm no longer hiding behind pride. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. Mom, I reread that letter probably 30 times. And for the first time in many years, I didn't feel rage. Just exhaustion. That same exhaustion when the soul no longer craves battle. Amber noticed I was restless. Another letter, she asked in the evening when I was turning the envelope in my hands. Yes. From her. Yeah. What does she want? She says she's ill, asks not to forgive, just to talk. She sighed silently and said, "And do you want to?" I was silent for a long time. I stared as Livia slept in the crib, clutching a toy bunny. "I don't know," I finally replied. "Part of me wants to draw the line. Another fears reopening old scars." "Sometimes the line is the way to heal the scar," she said, "but decide yourself." For 10 days, I hesitated. The letter lay on the desk like an anchor. Every time I passed by, I felt like it was pulling me back to the past I'd so carefully buried. But one morning, when the rays filtered through the curtains, I just grabbed the phone and dialed her number. "Hello," her voice was hoarse, aged. "It's me." A long pause. "Alex," I heard her sob. "I thought you'd never call." "Me too," I countered, "but here I am." "Thank you, you have no idea how much this means." We agreed to meet in 2 days, in the same park where it all started. I didn't know what to expect. Panic, regret, more excuses. But when I saw her, I felt nothing but compassion. She had aged. Silver strands, dark circles under her eyes, thin hands. This was no longer the woman who once said with a stony face, "You're no longer our offspring." This was just a mother, broken, lonely, exhausted. She smiled. "Thank you for coming. I'm not sure this is a good idea." Me neither, but I wanted to try. We sat on the same bench. Families walked by, children laughed, the air smelled of spring. No one knew that right here on this bench, forgiveness was happening that no one had asked for. "After the funeral, I didn't know why to live for a long time," she began. "Your father. Despite everything, he loved you. He just didn't know how to express it. Neither of us did. We were taught to be strong, not vulnerable, and you were always different, more authentic." I was silent. Words stuck somewhere between soul and mind. She continued, "When you left, I thought time would fix everything. But then I realized I was just waiting for the moment when I could stop deceiving myself. And now, seeing you," she looked at me, "I see you become what I always wanted you to be, strong." I couldn't hold back. "Strong after what you did. You kicked me out when I needed you most. You judged me for love." My voice broke. "You decided your opinion was worth more than my happiness." She burst into tears. "I know." "No, you don't. You lived with it like a shadow, and I lived with it like a wound." Long silence. Birds chirped somewhere above. "I'm not asking you to erase it," she finally said. "I just want you to allow yourself not to hate, because hate, it destroys not the guilty, but the one who holds it." Those words sank into me. I didn't know if I forgave her. But for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to listen. We sat for a long time. She told how she lives with her aunt, how she misses Dad, how sometimes she sees in dreams that boy who laughed in the backyard. I listened, not because I wanted to, but because I understood. This is probably the last thing I'll hear from her. When we parted, she asked, "Can I see Livia again, someday?" I looked into her eyes and said, "Someday, yes, but not today." She nodded. "I'll wait." Several weeks passed. I didn't know whether to text her. But one evening, when putting my daughter to bed, she suddenly said, "Dad, why don't I have a grandma?" Amber raised her eyebrows. "Where did you get that?" "Sam has a grandma and Kate, but I don't." I froze. How to explain to a 4-year-old that the world isn't always black and white? I sat beside her. "You do have a grandma," I whispered. "She just lives far away." "Does she love me?" "I think so." She beamed. "Then I want to draw her a picture." She ran to the desk, grabbed crayons, and started drawing a sun, a cottage, and three people holding hands. I stared at her, and suddenly understood how simple everything looks in a child's eyes. A couple days later, I found that drawing on the desk. And I don't know why, but I put it in an envelope and mailed it. No note, no signature, just the drawing. 10 days later, a response arrived. The envelope in the same neat handwriting. Inside, a photo, Mom holding that same drawing. And a short note. I cried, "Thank you, it's now on my wall." Amber smiled when she saw it. "So you forgave after all?" I shrugged. "I don't know, maybe just tired of holding a grudge." She hugged me. "Sometimes forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you." A year passed. Mom wrote occasionally, short, warm notes. No pressure, no attempts to intrude. Sometimes I responded, sometimes not. But one day, we invited her to Livia's birthday. When she stepped into the cottage, I noticed how nervous she was. Amber greeted her with a smile. Livia jumped up and handed her a fresh drawing. She cried, and I suddenly understood it doesn't hurt anymore. Later, when the guests dispersed, we sat on the porch. Mom looked at me and said, "Thank you for letting me be part of this." "Thank you for coming," I countered. Pause. "I often remember that day when I told you you're no longer our offspring," she said quietly. "It was the stupidest and most heartless thing I've ever done." I sighed. "And I often remember the day I said I don't want to know you anymore." "We're both responsible." She nodded. "Yes, but it seems now we're both moving forward." When she left, I went outside, breathed the night air, and stared at the windows of our cottage where Amber was putting our daughter to bed. I felt peace. Real quiet, long awaited. As I returned inside, words echoed in my head that I'd once said to myself. I won't let the past break my future. And for the first time in all this time, I understood. I kept that promise. Sometimes I reread my old post on the forum. The one where I asked, am I an idiot if I didn't let my parents see the newborn after they disowned me? Now I know the answer. No, I wasn't an idiot. I was an individual who learned to let go. And perhaps that's the only legacy worth passing on.